Hello friends, welcome to another spontaneous video. Here I am in Tokyo, Japan. It's really hot. I did not plan on making this video, but as many of you know, I live in Japan now and I'm deep in my Japanese studies. I study all day from morning to evening. But one thing that's changed recently is I started teaching French to a Japanese person, but I teach it in Japanese so that I can practice teaching in Japanese. I've also started teaching a little bit of guitar, beginner guitar in Japanese, again just so I can practice output speaking and using guess words related to the profession, to teaching guitar or to teaching French. And I started thinking about certain things about music, namely jazz improvisation. One thing that I find very difficult about jazz improvisation is the fact that it's like a language, especially the older styles of jazz like swing, bebop, older bebop, and even gypsy jazz. Whereas with a lot of modern styles of music, they try to teach you formulas which in themselves are not necessarily bad. It's just one small fragment of a bigger picture. Now before we get started, please like, please subscribe, leave a comment. It makes such a huge difference. I have courses on Sound Slice where I teach you how to construct authentic bebop lines, at least just the philosophy behind bebop line construction. I have courses on gypsy jazz. I have a book on harmonic visualization on the guitar that you can find on Amazon. You'll find all the links in the description box, and of course you can buy something off of Sound Slice. So the reason why I'm making this video is because with my French student, she asked me something that I didn't really know how to answer. Then I had to look it up. In French, you can express the future tense in a number of different ways that don't really translate directly to Japanese or English very well. So for example, if you want to say I will eat, in French you can express it as je vais manger or je mangerai. The difference between the two is very subtle. But the thing is, I'm a native French speaker in the sense that I don't know the rules of grammar, even though I went to French school and studied it. But most people who speak their mother tongues don't really know how the grammar works. They just know what feels right. And I've had that experience working with like people who've been playing music their whole lives. I remember working with some players, asking them, trying to get the thought process, get them to explain the thought process. And I remember one guy in particular said, I don't understand your question, because that person didn't know theory, but could play like mean bebop. Andres Faradi, if you want to know who he was. And so I don't understand your question. Like, what's a 2-5-1? What's this? I don't know. I just play what I feel. It just sounds right to me. And when we speak our native tongues, we just say what feels right to our ears, right? And sometimes even with my Japanese friends who are studying English, they ask me some questions that kind of stump me. They ask me, is this correct? Now here's the thing. I don't know if it's correct or not from the rule, according to the rules of grammar, but people do speak this way, and therefore it is used. It is natural. So there is such a thing as grammatically correct, but there's also another thing, what is basically used in day-to-day life in modern English, and that can change from region to region, right? In England, they spell certain words a different way. In North America, we spell words another way, like color, C-O-L-O-R, C-O-L-O-U-R. Certain things like that. The same thing with Japanese as well. There's textbook correct Japanese, and there's the Japanese that people use. And language evolve over time. So I've noticed that I'm starting to realize now, even in English, people spoke one way 60 years ago, and now people speak another way today. There's this generational difference as well. So how is this relating to the guitar? You know, I've talked about this, that music schools nowadays, they teach you this thing, chord scale theory. Now, there's nothing wrong necessarily in itself with that, but that's just not how people thought of improvisation in the old days, in the 30s and 40s, because the whole chord scale theory thing is something very recent, maybe within the last 50, 60 years. And in those days, it was just everyone was left to their own device. Of course, community and organic experimentation. But for example, let's take a song like All of Me. according to the chord scale theory, maybe one would say, okay, the first chord is C, and you're in the key of C, you play C Ionian. Okay, fine. Next chord is E7, and according to the chord scale theory, you play, I guess again, what is it? What do they call it? E mixolydian flat 9, flat 13, what heavy metal players call Phrygian dominant. And this is all fine, but you have players like Charlie Christian or Wes Montgomery, Charlie Parker. If they had an E7 in the key of C, they might play that, but often they would also play B minor 9 because they're decorating it as an E9 chord. I think there's a recording of Charlie Parker playing All of Me. I think he plays in the key of A flat. And on certain chords, he's going against, quote unquote, the grammar of jazz theory that was invented after the fact. So there's an example of quote unquote correct grammar versus what is actually done. And what is actually done can be hard to put into a standardized set of rules. And that's what makes it very hard to teach. And so that's the same thing with the future tense in French that I was talking about earlier. So my student, she asked me, all right, what's the difference between je vais manger and je mangerai? And there's also like little nuances. You can also say j'irai manger, j'irai manger plus tard, je vais manger plus tard, je mangerai plus tard. Three things that actually pretty much mean the same thing. But actually, I didn't know how to answer her question. I don't know how to answer the grammatical side of the question. I just know what feels right. Sometimes you can use them interchangeably, but it just depends on the situation. So what I did when I went home, I actually looked it up online, and I found like explanations, and the explanations were correct, but I wasn't really satisfied because I was able to come up with there are a lot of little tiny nuances, exceptions. And it's exactly the same thing with Japanese. In Japanese, there's this particle called wa and ga. And I've read so many explanations online. I've asked so many teachers, and teachers themselves are looking up the explanations online because it's something that they know naturally. They all say the same thing. But then, because I think about this all the time, I said, oh, okay, so according to this article, it says this, but what about this situation? And the teacher's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, in that case, okay, that's an exception. And then I say, what about this situation? Oh, yeah, that's another exception. And what about this? Oh, yeah. I'm coming up with so many exceptions to the rule that they're like, everyone's stumped. So that's the same thing with jazz guitar. You can simplify, you can try to standardize it, but if you really look at the music, you're going to realize, oh, it's harder, it's not so easy to standardize things. And the best way to go about learning all this stuff is to spend a lot of time listening carefully with your instrument in your hand. Listen to recordings of songs that you know, of improvisers that you like, and when you hear something that catches your ears, grab your instrument, try to figure out and try to figure out what they're trying to do. Is it going against quote unquote chord scale theory, or what is it? They're thinking of some kind of substitution, etc. And for the most part, as far as wa and ga are concerned, the Japanese particles, I wouldn't say that I've mastered it, but I'm a whole lot better at it than I used to be, and it gets better and better because I keep encountering all these situations that I just know that if I memorize this sentence as it is, it will be the correct usage of whether it's going to be ga or wa. For example, この近くにトイレがあるかご存知ですか? So that's a sentence that I've memorized the set pattern. I'm using the ga particle because I know that when you use this construction, that's the one that's correct to use, ga and not wa. But then I can make the same sentence, but instead of using ga, I can use wa, but I have to change the grammar structure a little bit. すみません、この近くにトイレはありますか? So instead of using ga, I used wa, but I changed what came after so that it's correct, it's natural to use wa in that situation. And it's the same thing with jazz guitar or the future tense in French. The best thing I told my students is that I can give you over time lots of examples where it feels natural to use je vais manger or j'irai manger or je mangerai. And over time, as you listen to the language, you get used to it and you just do it by feel as well. So it's the same thing with jazz guitar. You have to spend a lot of time listening. This is something that a lot of people are not doing because it's a little bit daunting. We often want just a formula that we can memorize and then, okay, now I can improvise. But that's not the case. It's more complex than that. You have to learn to feel things. So listen. Spend a lot of time listening. I certainly did a lot of that. All the best players did. So I want to focus on a few melodic fragments here that I call them. So the title of my video is a little bit strange. Fake arpeggios. What am I talking about? So often when we say, okay, over let's say a G7, if I tell you you can play a G9 arpeggio, you would think, okay, what's a G9 arpeggio? It's going to be G, B, D, F, and then what do? Do you go back to G? And then you play A, or you skip the G and go, it's like this. Or play A. Let's try it together. G, B, D, F, A. But then if you want to continue, where do you go? Do you play the third? So essentially, I only played the root once. Or do I play 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and I put the 9 everywhere there's a 9. So we often want like some kind of formula, just like this famous John McLaughlin pattern. It's not patterns like this or like sequences like all these kind of formulas that you can just apply and just copy and paste throughout. But this G9 arpeggio, when you in the context of, for example, early jazz, often it starts on the third of the chord and you play this. And you only play this fragment, nothing else. And then you have other fragments. You have these little twists and turns. It's all just a G9 arpeggio, but it's skipping notes, it's turning here and twisting here, that you can't put like you can't put a formula to it. You just have to absorb the fragment itself. And to get more bebop, it's using enclosures and everything. So the importance of spending a lot of time listening to the music that you want to play cannot be emphasized enough. So here's another arpeggio, for example, that is used a lot in bebop. Charlie Parker was very fond of this. You can use this over a G minor, if you're like in a G minor blues or whatever, or you can also use it over a C7. And it would go like this. It would be a G minor arpeggio, then you play the 7th, but then you play the 9th, and then the 11th, and just that. Try playing a G minor chord. Try it yourself. There you go. And you can mix up with different things. You have to have all these little melodic tools available to you. And I'm making these things up on the spot because I did the work. I listened to so much music that I just kind of giving the same explanation as Andreas Varadi. If you do enough listening, enough input, at one point you just start to hear it in your head. Or then maybe you can also do, instead of playing G, you start with the note A. Play that over G minor. And And it looks like I'm playing an F major kind of idea. It's very Wes Montgomery-like. Play G minor chord. You try it. These are the notes. A, C, A. Oh, sorry. A, C, A, E, C, D. Give it a try. Play around with notes. And the notes want to go in certain directions. So that's what makes bebop vocabulary extremely difficult to teach. Because if you try to come up with rules and standardized formulas, you're going to come up with lots of complex terms. Like, you know, like one of kind of my pet peeves is what they call the Bbop scale. In those days, they didn't call it bebop. They just put the chromaticism how they felt. But now they made a rule so that, oh, you do it so that you get the chord tones on the downbeats. Now that is one sound, but it's also possible to have the chord tones on the offbeats and the dissonant notes on the downbeats. So for example, play a C chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. So on the last note, I put it on the downbeat, the chord tone, but in between, I did a chromatic passing tone to the raw note over a C chord. This is on the 4th. And this chord tone is on the offbeat. But does it sound bad? Play the C chord again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Does this sound like a bad line to you? I think it sounds good over a C chord. So that's an exception. That's an example of something that goes against the bebop scale. It's just like the future tense in French or the wa ga particles in Japanese. On the surface, you have these nice articles that explain things, but it's not complete. There are so many exceptions out there, and the best way to just get used to this is to spend a lot of time listening. I can't stress this enough. For example, typical in Gypsy jazz or Django Reinhardt, I guess maybe in the 40s or something, say over C chord, I can play this arpeggio going up. I'm not showing you licks, by the way, I'm showing you patterns. And you have to take the patterns and play around with them so you can get different phrasings and everything. And you can add enclosures, passing tones, everything, but whatever. I'm making this up on the spot too, but here. Sorry. Okay, on the surface this is not a big deal. It's just like, looks like a major 7 arpeggio really. It is. But then, when I want to go down, I'm not going to go down. I'm not doing... That doesn't sound Jango. But this sounds Jango. As Dr. Jastika Rosenberg says, this is Jango. What did I do? Okay, I don't remember. Okay, I went down just like this with this shape, which is I guess an E minor shape. I skipped the C on the way down. I didn't do. I did. Then G, and then I played A because that's just something that Jango liked to do, and he didn't invent this. This is a sound that was very common in the 30s. And I do this, implying a kind of a chord over the C chord. Even though we're on C, I'm implying F minor. So a lot of bebop players, what they were doing in the 40s and even well into the 50s, is when they saw a chord, let's say A7, especially on dominant chords, they weren't thinking scales. They were thinking how to decorate this chord first of all, and it can be decorated in so many ways. Decorate as an A7 with a flat 13, if you will, with a 13, with a flat 5, with a 9, with a flat. They can play a line where it's going between all these different patterns. Let me see if I can just make one up right now. I had some regular 9s, I had some sharp 11s, I had some regular 11s, I had some flat 9s. This famous Charlie Parker lick from Billy's Bounce is another example where he has, it's over a C7 chord. You have C9, or just even G minor over C9, the 2 chord, but at the end it goes to flat 9. So this is very, very, very typical bebop. It's not scales, it's how you decorate the chords, and then it's how you also resolve into the next chord. Speaking of which, I have a course on Sound Slice where I talk about phrasing in the jazz styles, phrasing, like typical rhythms used in jazz. Check it out. I'm making all these things up kind of on the spot, chaining together different fragments as I hear them. Wes Montgomery, George Benson, Pat Martino, they were masters of this. Here's a Wes Montgomery fragment, let's say over A minor, or even D7. Or another one, A minor, same chord, A minor or D7. I think Pat Martino also liked to play that, but I think it's from Wes Montgomery. I don't know where he got it from, but I think I showed this in some video a long time ago, like over D minor. It looks like an A minor arpeggio. Oh, sorry. Oh! But it's over a D minor chord. I forgot where I heard Wes Montgomery use this. I think he might have used this like over, what's that song of his? Jingles. Jingles in the key of E minor. And at one point maybe Wes does some kind of B minor. See? D major, looks like a D major arpeggio, but over E minor. These are all these little melodic fragments that you have to pay attention to when you're listening to all of these older styles of jazz. And language acquisition can be a little bit of a personal thing, especially in jazz, because there's the artistic component. You have to acquire the vocabulary that you think that resonates with you. So let's say you're not into this Wes Montgomery sound. Okay, then find someone else to take from. And that's how I think we come up with our own styles. We gravitate towards what we like. We take this, we take that. In the beginning, maybe you can just take the lick itself, which is not very original, but it's fine. But then at one point, what would be even better is instead of taking the lick, is doing what I'm doing here for you, is showing you the concept or the greater picture, the pattern itself, and then you mess with it and make up your own lines. I've talked about this in many of my older videos. There's the most common jazz quote-unquote trick out there is over a dominant chord, especially when you're in a major key. Over a dominant chord, let's say in the key of G, and over D7, you play C minor. This is used across the entire jazz spectrum, as early as Louis Armstrong, Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins, Django Reinhardt. Charlie Christian was very, very fond of this. George Benson used this. Wes Montgomery used this. Pat Martino. So like, it's used across the entire jazz spectrum. But they all use it differently, according to their personal taste, according to the era as well. So then you have to go listen to the music that you like to see how each player is using that substitution. Because like I said, I cannot standardize it for you. The same way I cannot standardize these grammatical rules in Japanese, French, or English. Others have tried, but you see, the information is not wrong, but it's incomplete. You just have to immerse yourself in it. And it's not easy because it involves using your brain, thinking. And then people prefer not thinking. Let me know what you guys think of this one. Cheers.